Okay, so I'm going to try and explain what I did to make this modular character, fantasy character, whatever it's called, work. I noticed one bug already, but I think it's a fairly easy thing to fix. I might even try and do it while I'm doing this, but basically I took their BP modular character, I copied all this stuff over to my own character because this is where I had a whole bunch of other stuff, and this was relatively easy to make work. If you're already working out of this one, I think it should be fairly easy. So the biggest difference you're going to notice is I have some things named different. This is the actual component that's in the viewport. So if I click, where's my hips all, or they had two different versions of hips and I didn't realize what they were. I figured that out now. So hips gender is actually this hip piece that you're seeing here, the hips and upper leg on the characters, and they split and go male or female depending on the randomization or what you've chosen. The one that I've got called hips all because I didn't know what it was is actually, you can barely see it, but that little coin purse, it's hip attachments to the side. So that's the biggest difference. Everything else is named fairly similar. They just have a whole bunch of extra preceding gunk. So I put these in before I had made their changes. So I was trying to do this on my own at first, and then it was easier just to pull theirs over. So anyway, let's go into. They had two. Really, they only had two big things here. Three. Sorry. There's the construction script, which is this big chunk of stuff, and this is basically just setting the material for all of the parts, so that when you run the randomize function, it's gonna randomize a bunch of numbers and then use that data that it set up previously. But most of this you don't need to worry about. If you move it over, uh, you do have to change the stuff over here that is the component to match the actual components you completed. Everything else, all of these things, anything that's not an actual 3D physical piece that shows up in here, um, those things, if you were to copy over, in fact, I'll show you real quick. Oh no, I've already done it all, sorry. But if you were to copy this Boolean and go into another blueprint and paste it, it'll give you, crap, I lost all my stuff. It'll give you a version of this, the bool, but it'll be like gray. And if you right click, you can create it and it'll keep that. The problem is it won't keep any of the data that was on it. So whatever if you set the default to something different, or more importantly, like when you look at these arrays, these parts over here, those will not be copied over. So you have to refill that information out, that's probably what took the longest of all this is going and finding all the right parts and putting them in the right place. So anyway, sorry, I'm explaining more than I probably need to, but I just want to make sure it's clear. So all this is doing, this is the main piece, and this is what we're going to change. This is going through and it's setting all the color stuff based off of this integer here that it's randomly choosing or taking from whatever you fill in. And so it's just setting this, and it goes through this whole thing all the way to the end where it sets the pose on the individual pieces. That's the part that makes it actually move with the invisible character mesh underneath so that it actually looks correct. The important part that we're going to change is in randomize. They have, let me zoom out here. At the start, they are setting an random integer 0 to 3 for head covering. And what that's doing is in the set meshes, after it does all the randomization and decides what pieces are going to be, or what the numbers are going to be for each of these, it goes in and, where is it? Here. it's looking at, after it sets a bunch of like arms and legs and head, the main head piece, it comes into this spot and compares. If that head covering int, if that is 0, that is, so this is equals, it's going to go up here and it's going to set your head coverings no hair, your head coverings base hair, and head coverings facial hair to nothing. So it's going to clear those out by leaving this as select asset instead of where you see here, it's getting one from an array and putting that in the new mesh. This is saying don't set a mesh so it's essentially invisible. So the problem is if you set a helmet early on and then it comes through and it decides it wants to put hair on top of it or something, it's going to mess that up. Also, for some reason, they never set where you would actually set a helmet to be. So that's what I fixed in mine. So I'll show you how I did that. So I got too many tabs up here, but in that randomize function, it's the same thing. It's this head covering int. So what I did is I scooted all of this stuff over to the left, give me a little room. And after it's looking at the first time it checks if it's a male or female. So if male is true, it's going to go up here and it's going to set the male element for the head. And in this particular instance, all the heads are the male heads, but they have no, it's all just the base heads, and then the pink stuff gets filled in by the color of whatever was chosen in the earlier randomized integer. So that's what it normally was doing. It was going from true here over to this for male and this for female. So all I did is I duplicated this chunk of stuff, moved it up here, did the same for the female, moved it down. So I've got two versions of the same thing, and I'm checking that head covering int, which is set before we run this set meshes. So if it equals 0, true, I come up here and I'm doing the same thing, but I created a new array that just has the male helmet pieces, as you can see over here. I don't know why it shows them without the helmet at first. That's kind of weird. But anyway, I don't know if you can see that on the recording, but so these are all the helmets for the male head, and then I set up a second array for all the female helmets. And I think they're all basically the same, just shaped and sized a little bit differently to match the rest of the body parts. And if it comes up as false, then it goes ahead and it does what it was originally going to do in the first place, and it just sets the male head, which then allows it to later set your all the different pieces to it. So that's relatively simple to here, and then all 4 of these need to go back through to here. Make sure that you don't forget to set your target to your headpiece. And I think that was the main piece of this. Now, what I discovered is if you don't do anything else, it will give you the helmets. Those will show up randomly, or you can set the headpiece. If you set out on your where you set it up, you click on the dude and look at where's all those pieces. If you set head covering to 0, and then you set these to whatever you want, you start to get your helmets. But if you don't do anything else, you'll start to get hair and various other things, and that's because down here, when this sets everything to 0, originally this was going, so this is what I was explaining earlier. If that head covering int is 0, it comes up here and it sets it to nothing. But then it was coming back down here and looking at if it was randomized or not, and it was setting hair. And I think you had to get sort of lucky for it to come back up here to hair, or I'm not even sure how it was getting up there. It was coming from here. Oh, okay. Okay. Anyway, what I did is I just took from here, instead of, originally it was set to come down here. I just connected it to this one, so it skips over and it sets hair to nothing as well. And then again, this one was also coming down to this branch, and then that would put double helmets, or put those other weird hats and stuff on top of it. So I'm from here. I'm also skipping all the way over here. So I think that does mean that you could run into an issue where it gets to here and it decides, I don't even know what these pieces are. Oh, this is like the wolf head and some of these other things where the face shows through. It's not a true helmet. For if that shows up, you may end up not having this, whatever these could be, which actually these are all hair, so I think that may have been a bug anyway, although I never noticed that before. So far this has worked well, from what I've seen. The one thing I did notice later was down here, extra. The only thing that seems to be an extra is the ears, which give you, I think these are all like elf ears sort of thing, just pointy ears or something. That this is, if it's not set to human, it'll set these. So I think I was going to go ahead and just add here, do another branch and check that same head. What was it? Head. Yeah, there's too many ints in here. I don't remember what it was called. Yeah, I have to go back. But I'll basically do the same thing that I did over here and take this, and if it's equal to 0, this is super slow. There's a lot of crap in here. If this is equal to 0, then I will continue on and not add the ears. But if this is not set to 0, then it can be, it can go ahead and set the ears on. So I think this will, I believe this will work. So if we just keep running that, or is that random? So when I did this, yeah, so there's a helmet. They start to come in. Now I noticed that it looked like there was hair underneath there. I'm not 100%, yeah, okay, so there's something showing up there. And I can't tell what that even is. It looks like facial hair. Yeah. Oh, it's facial hair and like eyebrows. Interesting. So something is definitely not working there. We are at least seeing the helmets now, but so that's the ears. I don't think there's an issue there. At least didn't see one yet. So this is going to look at that at 0. The only thing sometimes, although they're not using a random, I've never used this clamp like this, so I'm not 100% sure how it, I guess there's the randomized function, so maybe there's something in there that I'm missing. Because this is setting our integer for head covering int, which is the one that we keep checking. Then it's just coming down as doing a random int based on the last index of, so if this is, yeah, 0 to whatever this is, 2022. So it's setting that, and then that's the number that it's using when we set the meshes. So it's just pulling number whatever it randomly chose there. And I don't think, I did a search for this, find references. There's only, it sets it here, and then these others are where I am using it. Well, this is their one original one, and then these are the two that I'm doing the check on. So I'm honestly not 100% sure where this would be coming in. And so if the helmet is displaying, that means that this is a 0, which means that this equaling 0 should come up here. And it should set all of these, which is base hair, no hair, facial hair. So those shouldn't have been set to anything. That should have been set to nothing. Should move on here, and this sets hair to 0 or nothing. I'm not 100% sure why it's doing that at the moment, but at least you can see where the helmets came from. The screenshots of what I showed earlier were that was a custom way that I was doing that, so I built the same array of those helmets. In fact, this is the same one I'm using. I just made a male one and a female one. And this is just, it's doing a similar thing. I could probably actually do theirs last, what is it, last, I don't remember what it was called, but that gets the same thing, and it just sets that randomly. And then I was doing this in my construction script instead of the way that they had theirs set up. Like this is basically what theirs was, and then I added this last little part. I'm setting a weapon for the way my character is set up, and then this is setting all of those poses correctly so that they move with the character. But basically everything from here over to here in this whole huge thing, this is what they have, and this just allows this, I believe, to set the material, and it's not doing any of the, it's doing the randomize and the set meshes there, so that's all the same. So this is all running the same stuff, just in as you move the character around, as it's the same stuff that you would run on begin play. And I believe the way this works in Unreal is you don't need to do it on begin play. And in some ways that's even better, because right now you'll notice like this is what this guy looks like, but if I hit do simulate, he changes because it ran it again. There's those capes not attaching correctly. I'm probably going to turn those off because those look horrible, and now everybody's got one. But anyway, that yeah, I'm honestly not sure why that's acting that way. I'll dig into that some more, and I'll poke you on Discord if I see it. Anyway, I'm going to post this up on YouTube. Others might be able to use it if they want to do the same thing, and hopefully Synty gets around to updating this soon enough. Anyway, enjoy. Hope this works for you.